And we're live with our 249th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on social media, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on social media. Seth, say hi.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. We are really excited to have Tanya with us today. Woo-hoo. It's been quite a while since we had Tanya on the podcast. We were reminiscing a little bit before we jumped on and started recording about how she was on episode 61, which at this point, 200 episodes ago, it's a few years. But it's great to have her back. We're going to get into her backstory or her experience over the last few years since the last time we talked to her and catch up with her shortly. I did want to give a shout out today to Diana Initiative, who is sponsoring this episode. The Diana Initiative is a one-day information security conference committed to helping those underrepresented in information security. It is happening Monday, August 5th, 2024 in Las Vegas, Nevada at the start of Hacker Summer Camp. This event features multiple speaker tracks, workshops, a capture the flag competition, and villages with hands-on learning. Check out www.dianainitiative.org for more information. You can get your tickets today with early bird pricing. That might be done by now, or student discounts. They are also seeking student scholarship sponsors and event sponsors if you are interested. So go to Diana Initiative if you can. It is before Black Hat and B-sides. It's August 5th, so it's a little earlier in the week. So if you are going to be out there, you should attend. It'll be a good conference. And I think, Tanya, I saw on social media that you were speaking or you had submitted to speak. I'm not sure at Diana Initiative. Is that true?
So I have spoken at Diana every year since it started. And this year I was not accepted. However, I've been mentoring someone and I got her to submit. She was really nervous about it and she got accepted. And she is
awesome.
Over the moon. And it sounds so weird. I'm like, who cares if I'm not in? She got in. And I'm really proud of her. And I'm really excited because the first time someone speaks at a conference, right? Like it's such a big deal for them. And I'm like, oh,
yeah. Yes. Yeah, we all remember those days and being like, so just like extremely nervous, right? Like even, I mean, Diana Initiative isn't like the DEF CON stage, but, just putting yourself out there at times, to do that is a huge hurdle, right? And I don't know if we really talk about that a lot, but it is the case. Yeah. Well, that's great. So like I have stories about Diana Initiative. Before we get to that, there was a couple of things that I did want to announce. We have launched a newsletter for Absolute AppSec. It's news.absoluteappsec.com. Finally, realistically, the newsletter is just a summary of what we're talking about every week. We're going to try and put that out there, give people another avenue to actually, view the content. So it's not only in spoken or video form. There's going to be a more long form discussion on what we're doing. We have finally a marketing intern that's going to help us actually promote some of these things. So news.absoluteappsec.com, sign up now, and you'll get this week's episode. This week's newsletter will come out towards the end of the week as opposed to during the episode itself, obviously. The other thing is you can support the podcast at merch.absoluteappsec.com. We do have t-shirts and, stickers and other things that has launched this last couple of weeks as well. Again, having a team behind us is helpful to actually promote some of those things.
The intern's just there to show us how to use TikTok.
Yes.
We're going to learn how to TikTok.
We're going to learn how to TikTok. We're just going to, start cutting up, episodes of Ken dancing, right? Like on the podcast, I guess.
That would be fun.
That'd be fun.
It'd be horrible to watch, but fun somehow.
Dancing to AppSec, fun somehow. Yeah. We'll see. We'll probably get more viewers there than when we talk about secure guardrails, right? That's what we're going to talk about, Tanya.
Yes. Yes. I also don't know how to use TikTok. Don't feel bad. Every time I open it, I'm like, why am I so old?
Yes. Just don't start scrolling. Yeah. the algorithm
Yeah.
is super creepy, right? Like that's
Heard.
super creepy. Yes.
Definitely heard.
Cool. Well, Tanya, welcome back. Tanya currently works at SemGraph. She's the founder of She Hacks Purple, We Hack Purple. Industry speaker, and like we've been on panels with Tanya in all over the world, right? Australia, we saw you, and at all the global AppSec conferences and all these different places. It's great to have you back. So let's start with, what are you currently doing, right? Like we know you're over at SemGraph. There's the Academy stuff, but what is it that you're doing there? And just catch us up.
So, SemGraph bought my little tiny company, We Hack Purple, last year. And so I've been there almost a year now. And what I've done so far is basically I took the We Hack Purple Academy. I took all the content out of there, rebranded it. So it's the same. And then I made a whole bunch of new courses and then got kind of dragged other people at SemGraph to make them make courses. And they're very willing. They're very nice about it. And so now we have a way, way, way bigger academy and everything's free. Then I also have been doing like live free events for their community. So panels and fireside chats. And I'm doing my first, I guess, so I started doing like these AppSec dinners. So when I'll speak at a conference, I'll just invite a whole bunch of people that are into AppSec, whether I know them or not, to come have dinner. And so this summer I'm making cards against AppSec. And in Vegas this summer, we're renting out a little restaurant to just like play cards against AppSec and eat snacks and drink beverages. And I'm pretty excited that people are putting up with my weird sense of humor. I'm hoping it's not like too offensive, like it rides that line. We'll see as I work on it. If you want to review the cards, let me know.
Yeah, send them over. It would be, I feel like the best cards against humanity, or like, cards against whatever, do toe that line of, is this appropriate? Yeah, exactly. Right. Like that. I think that's where you'll get the best, especially when people are drinking, right? That's when you're going to get the best reactions, I guess, to that. So
yes. Like when I was at Microsoft, during my interview, they gave me a copy of the Steve Ballmer edition of Cards Against Microsoft. And I can't tell you all the amazing things that are in it, but wow. Wow. I was like, thank you. They're like, not everyone gets this gift when they interview. You're special.
Yes.
That's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. Can you share those now? That's what we're going with, right? No.
I have them in a drawer, and sometimes I'll have people over and we'll play, and they're like, Tanya. But I know the cards, so I know the really good ones.
Yes. There you go. Yeah. That's how you're having a good time. Sweet. But
I'm trying to just build a lot of things out for them, essentially, in regard to community and education. And so I basically get to give all my work away for free now, which is exciting because with We Hack Purple, I had to pay bills. But now I don't have. Well, I still have to pay bills, but SemGraph pays them, and that's pretty nifty.
Yeah.
And they give me like a budget for silly things. Like they bought me a 3D printer, and I'm learning how to use it so I can make very silly swag.
That's a good time investment. That's one of the things in the background. There is a 3D printer. That was a COVID purchase for us, right? Like a pandemic, like we're all at home and we were printing all like fidget spinners and right. Like it had really heavy use while we didn't have anything else to do basically. And now, now I'm the only one that prints stuff, and it's stupid little like pipe fittings and stuff to replace things that break in the house, which is great, but it's not as exciting as it once was. But so we're excited.
SemGraph earrings. I was complaining we didn't have feminine swag, and I was like, I want to have like dangly earrings. And they're like, if you want to make them, you can. Here's your 3D printer. Good luck with that.
Go
Yeah,
for
we'll
it.
see if anyone wears them other than me.
So cool. Yeah. Hey, I'm sure if you take them to Diana Initiative or Hacker Summer Camp, someone else will want them, right? Like, that'd be great. So as like, what is your official position with SEMGREP now then? Are you
Oh,
just like community like community involvement or
head
what?
of head of community and education.
Okay.
And so I do so my job, it sounds weird. It's kind of a little bit of whatever I want. And then I help various teams with things. So for instance, I was like, we should do something special for October because it's Security Awareness Month. We should do something special. And they're like what? So I got to hire some of my team from We Hack Purple too. So some of them are with me now, which is awesome. So if you're listening and you know Amanda's in the fold again, and everyone's like, yay, Amanda's back, like all the We Hack Purplers. And so we brainstormed and I was like, what if we offered so Security Awareness Month, October, I get a lot of requests for people where they're like, hey, can you come speak for our team? And I'm like, yes, if you have money, because I enjoy money. I don't know if either of you like it, but I'm a fan. And,
I don't know.
like,
Ken's running a startup, so I like, apparently they just like to burn it over there. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
Thanks.
Well, all the power to you. I am actually quite impressed, and I wanted to congratulate you on starting a startup because I think that's badass. And
I appreciate
I'm
it.
rooting for you.
And likewise, similar to you for your work and getting essentially acquired by SEMGREP. It's pretty amazing. I do have questions around what people are asking, topics they're interested in, but we can table that for now as we go through and sort of talk about how things are evolving. But yeah, I'm sure there's lots of fascinating things because it seems like you're just engaging with the community a bunch. Which leads to a lot of opportunities that necessarily I wouldn't get and Seth wouldn't, get. So yeah, sounds like it's fun.
I mean, sometimes it's about having the time to do the thing, and sometimes it's just about having an idea and just trying it out, right? Because sometimes I try things out and they go very poorly. And then I just like, don't mention those later. Like sometimes I'm like, how about this? And everyone's like, no. And sometimes I do things like at We Hack Purple, we did a diversity scholarship. And I didn't think it would go that well. And then Katie Missouri's like, how much does it cost for 30? I was like, oh, hello.
For 30 people?
Right? And yeah, so we had,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so we had so many sponsors. We had over 100 women of color go through the AppSec Foundations program at We Hack Purple. And not all of them graduated because you can't make people finish many courses, but a whole bunch of them did, and lots of them found jobs. In 2021, we used to keep track of who got jobs or not, and we were at something like 98% of graduates finding a job in their field in the first 6 months. And so that was great. Right. And I had an intern help me track that. But in Canada, we pay them, just to be clear. The government helped you pay them in Canada as well. They'll pay up to 75% of an intern's pay so that they get job experience and you take a chance, and some of them work out. But so for October, one of the ideas was, what if I'll give a free security awareness talk for a company if they'll sit down with our sales team, and the sales team will try to help advise them on their AppSec program or whatever, and just basically like, can we help or not? And so they're like, really? And I'm like, well, it's not like we're going to get like 100 people answering. And they also have to like kind of qualify. They can't be like, well, we only have one dev. Is that okay? Right? Like they have to have, I don't know, maybe 100 devs or something.
Yeah.
And actually like be on the market for some of the things SEMGREP sells. But I'm like, but yeah, if that lines up, I'll do it. I love talking. I love speaking, as we discussed earlier. Like I was a professional musician that performed constantly before I started doing public speaking. And I'm like, wow, this is way easier. I don't even have to play guitar or drums at the same time. I don't even have to be in key. No one's drunk or throwing things. This is the best.
How are you doing these? Are you traveling to do these, or is it a mixture? Or just these are virtual then?
it's just going to be virtual. I don't think I'd be able to travel and do more than a few, and then there'd be cost associated with it more than time, right? So just virtual. But to be quite honest, like last year, so October is usually the month where I make most of my money for the year. And last year I made like 6 figures doing talks on the side. And SemGrep has a pro moonlighting policy, if that makes sense. So like, as long as it's not a conflict of interest and you show up at work every day, like do whatever you want.
You know, when I joined GitHub before Microsoft, obviously before the Microsoft acquisition, it was like I don't even know if paragraph was accurate. It was like 3 sentences or something statement that was like, you can use your work computer as long as it's not during the work hours. You can use your work computer to like build whatever stuff. If you make money off that, fine, it's yours. We don't have any policy against it. I don't know. They said it very, very succinctly in very little words, but that was the agreement. And I was blown away by that. You know, that's a reason people go to work at companies such as GitHub, SemGrep, you know, wherever that they culturally take care of people. It means a lot.
When other companies so many companies tried to buy We Hack Purple and ended up actually getting into a bidding war with 3 companies. And then SemGrep's was the nicest offer. Just to be clear, it's not that the other offers were like mean in nature, but it was like the most open and fun sounding, and all of the, and so, but a lot of them were like, we own Alice and Bob Learn now. And I'm like, no. Those are my cute little characters. Like, Alice is going to date a pen tester. Okay. And that needs to be my decision that she dumps him because he's not ethical. I agree with you. I get that, like, they don't want you to do a conflict of interest. Like we make a SAST, so it's like, Tanya, don't go code a SAST for someone else, like as if I would know how, but let's pretend I did. You know what I mean? I would get that, like, don't go. But other than that, it's like, if someone's going to create something on the side, it's like, that's theirs. I hear you.
Well, I don't know. Like I had really bad experiences with companies on that front, like to the point that
I was there for one of them. Two of them, but one of them specifically.
Like literally to the point that we weren't even using like their hardware or anything, and built something. And then we spoke with Black Hat about it. I mean, this was over a decade ago. And then basically got threatened with lawyers and it was not a fun situation. So like, since then I've been on the lookout for it, right? Like, okay, like, I'm going to sign this contract, but I'm going to make sure there's a clause in there similar to what you've got with SemGrep, similar to what GitHub does. That's like, hey, you know, like, I have ideas that are not related to this. You don't own them, right? Like, and if you think that you do, like, what am I at that point, right? Like, and it's part of that, like, valuing people for who they are, as opposed to you're just another cog in their system, right?
You know, sometimes the rule is that you can't do the thing, but then they let it go anyway. Like when I left Microsoft, I was like, I wrote all these talks when I worked for you, and I could just write new talks and stop doing them. But to be quite blunt, I speak very nicely about your products in them.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, do whatever you want, Tanya. Do it. Like, you keep doing you. Like, don't stop. But not every company feels like that. Like, sometimes if you do DevRel, they're like, you're not allowed doing any of those talks anymore. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that's inconvenient.
Yeah.
You know, I'm actually curious, like, how does one get into the DevRel space? And I say that because, I mean, I would assume it's obvious that you need to have speaking skills, because that's mostly what your job, or a lot of it. Anyways, what do I know? But it seems like a lot of your job would be speaking, right? But how does one kind of even get into that? And I'm thinking like the folks that I can remember, like I would put Jim Manico as like at one point anyways, and maybe now more so for his own company, but you know, in that space, Jason Street, I think, does a bit of DevRel stuff as well. I could be wrong. But yeah, I don't know how you get into that side of things.
So DevRel's sort of four things, and sometimes people don't realize that. So one is content creation, and so that can mean speaking or writing. So there's some DevRel that mostly write, like my friend Liren Tal. When I'm researching my book, I keep finding articles by Liren, like all the time. He writes really in-depth, technical, researched articles, right? And he does speak, but he mostly writes. So that's okay. So that's one. Product feedback. So you develop trust with customers in a different way than if you're a salesperson or a support engineer. And so like customers would just tell me the most blunt things about Microsoft products. Then I go work with the product teams and help them improve it. And like together we completely redid big parts of Azure Defender. And it became way more popular. Like all that recommendations page, we completely redid the entire thing based on lots of customers telling me their feelings. And then the team being super open to hearing that feedback. So that's two. And then interacting with the community. And that is like, whether it's creating spaces for community, participating, contributing. And there's so many background things that happen with DevRel. So for instance, at the AppSec PNW conference last weekend, I did all their social media for them. People don't realize that, right? And then I photographed as much of the conference as I could, and gave them, and so did my staff. And then we gave them like this giant package after. And like besides Vancouver Island, I brought my significant other who's a professional photographer, videographer. And together again, we like photographed and videoed the entire thing and gave it to them because I love those communities and I want to contribute, right? And so we do like all this background stuff that people don't see, if that makes sense. And then you develop ties. And then, for instance, it's like next year, maybe someone I'm mentoring is going to be allowed to speak that might not normally get accepted. Do you know what I mean? And so there's community involvement. And then what is the fourth one? Oh, and then that's speaking. So content creation and then public speaking or like public appearances, if that makes sense. And so sometimes people just want to do one of those things. So like I had someone who wanted to interview with me and he's like, oh, I just want to speak. Like, I don't want to do any background community things. I don't want to organize events. So like I do so much organizing of things in the background that people don't realize. And those are the things that get, so people are like, oh, you just automatically get accepted. And I'm like, I don't, but you better believe it. If you like photograph the entire conference, you do a crap ton of social media coverage for them, you found them 2 sponsors and you help them sell tickets. Yeah. Next year, they really strongly consider you for keynote. Yeah. You do 400 favors for them and they're like, yeah, she's pretty nice. Maybe she could come back. Right. And so I feel like there's like a lot of invisible parts of that job. And then you also like, I end up doing, because I've done AppSec for a long time. I end up advising on like a lot of product features and things that aren't customer feedback. They're just like Tanya experience. Like,
I see.
So it would be so cool if we had this. And then I'll ask some customers and they're like, yeah, we want that.
Well, so, okay, that actually ties pretty nicely, dovetails pretty nicely into some questions I had. So, because if people are giving you feedback on maybe product, stuff that maybe isn't in there and they'd like to see it, then I was also thinking, surely there has to be trends that you extrapolate from the types of questions or topics you're being asked to discuss. So like, just as an off the wall example, let's say maybe now you're getting more questions on SBOMs or API security or whatever. I don't really know. I'm just making stuff up. Are you seeing any specific trends? Are there things people are approaching you to have SEMGREP do, or maybe just more generally asking, questions about more than ever? Yeah, I'm curious for sure.
Well, I had an idea that like when you find a finding in the product, I'd really love to see a lesson on how to fix it. Like, why is it like, so what does this mean? How does it work? Why is it scary? How do I fix it? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, if you want to do that, you can. Like, sure, we'll try it, but it's a lot of work. Right. So I'm like, I kind of need some approvals. And so I met with a bunch of customers, and one of them suggested that exact thing. So I was like, rang it down. Then all the other customers are like, I really like the idea. I was like, yes, 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 yes. Okay, now I have 5 votes for that. Yes. And so I like, it's selfishly, I just think it's a great idea, because when I was a dev, I remember getting the report and being like, great, so now I'm going to become one with my favorite search engine. And if you're not a dev that's familiar with searching for those things, it can be hard. So when I'm searching for answers, so one of my cheats is I add OWASP to whatever search term I'm doing. So like whatever the vulnerability is or whatever, and I find the content value goes up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if there's a cheat sheet from OWASP. That's my favorite of all the OWASP projects.
So yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I don't know, like we get this a lot, because we talked a little bit about like how we do a lot of code reviews and things like that. Like our recommendations, like we spend, I don't think people realize the amount of time that it takes to actually curate some of that, right? Like to find an answer for, hey, there's an authorization flaw if you use this framework in this way, right? Like here's a recommendation for it. So cheat sheets, like the OWASP cheat sheets, are amazing for some of that, but also in general, right? Like the recommendations in there are usually more relevant than what you can find. And I'm with you, because I love that SemGrep's starting to bubble that up, because that's always one of my huge complaints with tools in general, is the recommendations are so generic. Yeah, that you're like, you've just given the developer a homework assignment to go figure out what's going on, right?
Yes, we have like, so I don't know if you've seen that meme of a person against a wall with like a tuba on their face, and it's like every company unwanted AI, and they're like blowing this huge loud tuba at a person's face. So if we have an AI,
Yes,
and it tries to help you triage and tries to give advice on how to fix things, but it's different to have a bunch of text that tells you a generic answer versus like, this is a lesson that helps you understand why this matters. And sometimes they'll be like, well, you should sanitize your input. I'm like, no, you should validate that you're receiving the proper input. Then if you must accept special characters that are potentially dangerous, you should sanitize those out or escape them. What's the difference? Why do you do it in this order? Let me tell you. Right? So like, because yeah, I remember getting advice where they're just like, what if you wrote code that wasn't so crappy? I'm like, well, security person, this is why no one wants to work with you, right? So like the more help you can give, and then like eventually what everyone wants to do, like, is provide the actual code, right? Mm-hmm. That is the thing that lots and lots and lots of companies are working on. And so imagine if you could just be like, hey, here's a pull request and our suggested fix. That's a thing I would love to see, like sooner rather than later. And wait, the code compiles.
Yes.
It actually fixes the bug as well.
We've I don't know, like being an ex-developer, right? Like I've been down this road like so many times with, okay, how do we generate the code? And I know Ken can speak to this as well, but like trying to actually implement fixes and then provide them, because as a developer, like doing a code review, right? Like, hey, if I don't like something, that's the expectation, is I'm going to do a pull request to you saying, maybe you should consider this instead, right? And these are the reasons, 1, 2, 3, 4. In the development community, that's very standard, but in the security community, it's not. That being said, when I don't have full access to your whole build pipeline, it's a lot harder to actually give you a pull request. And so I can understand, like, there's this, it's so difficult to come up with something that actually fixes the problem when, from a code review perspective, I only have access to one project or one file, or just like such a small scope, exactly what you're doing there, that it becomes, take this with a grain of salt, but this is what I would try to do, right? Like I want that pull request and I want it to work in the way that you're saying. But getting to that point is going to take something like AI, something like what Ken and his company is doing, full access to the full environment, the full build, or what SemGrep's doing to actually get to that point. But on the flip side, what I'm seeing out of AI right now, we're not there yet. I would love it, but we're not there yet. I don't know what your experiences or what you've seen on the SemGrep side, though.
So I actually, I just saw a talk by Jason Haddix. I don't know if you follow his work, but
Oh, yes.
it exploded my brain. So he was like building a bot live on stage for us and telling us how he prompts it to get better results. So I started using some of his tricks, which he asked us not to share. So I'm not going to share his tricks because he asked us not to. And but he said we could
He's
use
got a
them
training
for
course.
ourselves.
Yeah.
He has a
Yes.
training course, and oh my God, I want to take it so bad. Like I really, really, really want to take his training course. And so he explained like all these things about how the way you write your prompt can get you better results. So yesterday I was researching. So I was doing the React framework for my book. And so I'm giving secure coding advice in the top 10 programming languages and the top 10 frameworks, and React is one of them. And so I used some of his prompt suggestions, and it was like 10 times better results. It was crazy. Like usually whenever I'll ask the AI, I'm like, make me a list of secure coding guidance or security best practices for the React framework. And it'll say nothing to do with React. It'll be like, you should sanitize inputs. You should output encode things. Well, actually, React does output encode if it's in the text context anyway. So I'm like, thanks for nothing, right? But using a lot of his tips and tricks, it actually had some advice that was good. And so then I could go read those articles because I still think the AI is stupid. I still don't trust it. But it's like, make me a list, and then I could go read all of those articles. And the articles were good, although I ended up seeing the same article a few times, and it was one of Liren's. And I wrote him to tell him. And I was like, your article's awesome. It's so awesome that there's at least 6 copies that I found. Here they are.
Other places. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing how that
Out
happens.
his name.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I'd put a shout out there too, right? Like from the prompt perspective, if you're using AI in that way, like using something like Daniel Miessler's Fabric, there's resources that are out there that'll make the AI much more efficient, right? Like obviously Jason's got his whole pipeline. What he's figured out over the last couple of years is pretty amazing as well. So we can't recommend, and he was on the podcast, couple months ago, right, Ken? We had him on. He was talking through it. Yeah. So yeah, definitely there's ways to make it better. It's just a matter of like actually figuring that out for you, right? Like what's specific to what you want. Yeah.
But another way that we could help devs. So what happens with podcasts is everyone talks before the podcast. So third wall here, or breaking the third wall. Is that what it's called? Where you talk to the audience. But we were talking about secure guardrails. So that's a thing you could do. So let's say you have a rule that you don't, because we're talking about React, or I am. They have this thing called dangerously set inner HTML. And the purpose is to inform whoever's programming, like, listen, this is like the recipe for cross-site scripting. If you put user input in here, like you should not do that, right? And so that's why it's named dangerous. And so what you could do is set up a guardrail that tells you you're using that. And for instance, if let's say you have a wrapper library that you can put around it. So you're supposed to run this validation one, and then you put the stuff in there. And it's like, listen, I see you calling it, and I don't see you calling the validation routine first, or you're not using the wrapper library that does the validation we expect. And so I think this is a problem. And you could do it with like a static analysis tool. I used to try to use unit tests to do some of the tests that I want, but it didn't scale at all. Like it seemed like a great idea when I was just doing it for one little app. And then I remember my boss being like, so that took a week. And he like looks out among, like he did this. He's like, look at all our other apps. And I was like, oh, this doesn't scale, crap. But for instance, though, if you took like any stack analysis tool that lets you write rules, and most of them do, you could write a rule, and then when you check in your code, it could run that and be like, hey, I see you did this, but you didn't do that. Or for instance, so there's a lot of deprecated functions in different libraries and different languages where it still exists for backwards compatibility, but we know there's security issues with it. And there's a newer one, right? And so it could say like, listen, we saw you using this. You're supposed to be using this. We would like it if you did this. And it's sort of like, it could be, in your IDE with like a little red squiggly telling you this. It could be when you check your code in, maybe it triggers an alert. Maybe it actually blocks, depending upon, like, maybe you're like, I'm going to take user input and put it directly into the eval function. And both of you are like, no. Right. But then there's some things where it's like, that's probably a bad idea, but you're not for sure. But if you can have a technical control that stops you, or like, secret scanning. So I don't know about you, but back when I went to college in the 90s, I was taught that you should put the connection string in the comments for every single environment, so it's more convenient for the next programmer, including the passwords. That's what I was taught, right? And then eventually it turns out malicious actors were like, thank you, that's so convenient, Tanya.
Yes.
Right. So I have checked in code with secrets. For those that are only listening, hangs my head in shame. But, when you check your code in, it could say, no, I'm not checking that in. And I actually had that happen to me when I worked at Microsoft. I would make demos because I did developer relations. So I never worked on any real code for Microsoft that they sell.
Okay.
I would love to tell you that I built cool stuff, but mostly I built crappy demos, and crappy as in wildly insecure on purpose. And so, yeah, I remember I was like checking in a connection string on purpose, and it was like, no, you may not check that in. And I was like, I'm a dev, I can do whatever I want. And so I did get around it, and I checked it in, and then I got a call from my boss because it alerted my boss. Yeah. And then it turned out I actually triggered a security incident, which was not the way I wanted to meet the incident response team. And I actually like had to spend a long time. So like, I want people to like me. Like I'm not one of those people where if someone doesn't like me, it's the end of the world. But if I'm going to work with people, I want to try to have a good relationship. And that was not the way to meet one of my teams. And so it took a few months of me like reporting issues to them and them taking care of it. And then me complimenting on what a good job they did. And then eventually they're like, she's not so bad. But that is like a guardrail, like a technical control that's like, hey, you're not following the secure path, right? And you said you could probably talk about that all day.
We could. Yeah, I mean, we could, because I mean, from like, I know we always used to talk, especially as Ken like was working at GitHub previously, like some of the controls that they have in place that they implement in their pipeline is very much in that vein, right? Or we look back at like the Netflix and their like golden pathway or whatever, your secure pathway that they would provide to developers, which was very much the same sort of idea is, hey, if you do things in this manner, we as a security team are not going to come bother you, right? But then at GitHub, the second that you start touching the CSP rules, right, or the CSP headers, we're going to have concerns and we're going to really go through your code, and it's going to be very painful, right? Because we have to make sure that the whole platform is secure. And the organizations that I see, right, like as a consultant coming into them that do security right, put those gates into place, not necessarily as a, hey, we're punishing developers, but we're letting you know what the proper way to do things is. I mean, so the idea of secure guardrails has become more popular. sad to say though, right? Like the organizations, like a lot of the smaller organizations that I deal with just don't have the capacity to build something like that. So I know that's something that SEMGREP's been working on, like making that easier, at least having something in place. And, Ken, I know you're dealing with some of this as well, like how, dry run is like the watching for pull requests and other things. But what is the way that like SEMGREP is actually like bubbling that up, right? Like is there like a blog post, recommendations that are coming out, as far as those are concerned?
So tomorrow we're releasing a course on how to build secure
Oh,
guardrails.
okay. So in the academy.
In the academy, and everything in the academy is free. The payment, just to be transparent, is that I will put you on the community newsletter, and then me and Amanda write the newsletter. And I'm very biased, but Amanda and I both think it's pretty good. And it does have a meme, and it follows, like, if you were ever on the We Hack Purple newsletter, it's very similar. So we invite you to events, and there's content and stuff like that. But and you can unsubscribe, and you can still use the academy. But now that the payment is out of the way, so that this guy named Peter that I work with, he is a security researcher, and he started talking about this like a zillion years ago. So he did his PhD on the idea of building secure guardrails and like basically building technical controls that help you put you back on the paved road. And so he built a whole course. And I actually haven't had a chance to complete the whole course yet because it's coming out tomorrow. Although I did have pre-advance access, and I've seen some of it. And I got to read all of his slides and stuff like that. And so then they want me to make a course too about more like the management version, or like so imagine you're an organization and you're like, so I heard about this and I want to be more proactive with my AppSec program. What could I make a guardrail about? Because you don't need 100. You don't need 100 guardrails. Most companies don't need that. Like if you could have one or two to stamp out really problematic things, life is way better, right? To be quite blunt, like I see customers sometimes, and this is like my whole AppSec career, where they get a SAST and they turn it on and they turn all the rules on. They turn everything. And they're like, why do I have 40,000 results? Well, because you've never scanned ever before. And you have a whole bunch of legacy apps, and some of them are almost as old as me. And that is old for an app, but not a woman.
That's always reminded me he's not too old, so don't worry.
In COVID, I went like really full middle-aged lady. Like I started drinking Coke Zero. I started growing flowers instead of just food. Like I'm like, what's happening to me? But anyway.
I started growing white patches in my beard and hair in different places. So
I know.
Hey,
I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I know what is happening. But so the whole time it's like, then they get overwhelmed, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what if instead of trying to be perfect immediately, we just do the most important rules first, right? So we just look at, all the OWASP top 10-esque vulnerabilities first. And like, we just scan for those, or we just work on making sure we have amazing input validation everywhere, or whatever the thing is, right? And so I, the AppSec person, I'm still going to scan the crap out of everything, and I'm going to look at that. And if I see something scary, I'm going to come and say like, hey, I found something. Could we have a discussion? But if I'm running something in the CI automatically, I don't want to like pile 200 bugs on a team and make them feel, to be quite blunt, like crap, right? Like it feels crappy to be told you have 200 serious bugs in your app. Like I'm like, ow, those were my feelings.
Also,
and so,
for security and for developers, now you've got a huge, we were talking about this. I was at B-Sides SF, and there were like talks on just managing bug tickets. And I'm like, I don't know that the problem is managing bug tickets. It sounds like the problem is filing bug tickets is the real issue. But in any case, I think both ends have to deal with a large backlog, and it's no good for anyone.
Yes. Well, and whenever possible, I try to use context from all sorts of different places, like figure out that it is a true positive, figure out that it truly actually causes business risk. Because
Mhm.
sometimes it's like, yes, theoretically, that is a serious vulnerability. However, there's like 500 other mitigating factors. And like this other one that's a medium, but that's public facing in my super mission critical app actually scares me more. So could you fix that instead? But I feel like we overwhelm people a lot as an industry. And if we could give like, this is what matters most to me, could you do these things first? And then these still matter, they matter less, but could you do these in the next 90 days, sort of, and more realistic? And so when you're doing a guardrail, you don't want to do 100. You want to look at what the absolute most important things is that is facing your organization, and then figure out if there's a way to make a technical control to stop it. So another example would be infrastructure as code. So I was actually talking with, so I still consult through IAN's research, and Ken, you were actually asking about this sort of, so when I write a talk, I often do it because 10 or more IAN's clients ask the same question. So I've worked with over 50 companies on their security champions programs, and I've used that anomalized data to make multiple conference talks and blog posts. Because if tons and tons of companies ask the same thing or have the same problem, that means it's worth talking about, right? And so I was working with a company yesterday, and we're just talking. Oh no, I lost my train of thought. Damn. But they are facing like this huge backlog. They're an enterprise. They have someone somewhat new that's taken over AppSec. He's taking it very seriously. He's doing the best he can. But he's like, I don't want to send 200 bugs to them. Like, what do I start with? And one of the things was infrastructure as code. And I was like, listen, if you're doing Terraform, you could use Open Policy Agent, make your own policy that's less strict. Because we were talking about using Chekhov from Bridge Crew. I don't know if you've used that, but I think it's quite nifty. So it's a free scanner for infrastructure as code. And Prisma Cloud acquired them, and that's awesome. And We Hack Purple like worked with them. They're really cool. I like them a lot. But their product's still free, right? But it's quite strict. And so I'm like, what if instead you used Open Policy Agent, made like a weaker one at first to just address the most dangerous things, and then work your way up to the default for Chekhov? And they're like, oh, I'm like, because if you send them, here's 400 changes I need to this container. It's like, let's just start over, right? Just go home. And so, yeah, we're talking about how to make things more manageable. And so with Open Policy Agent, like you can write your own policy for your infrastructure as code. And I'm like, you could make that a guardrail. So in your CI/CD, it stops, or it can scan it like when you check it in or whatever, right? And just be like, okay, so this is how we do this here, and you're not doing it that way. Like you could even write like a secure coding guideline, a guide, like a policy for your infrastructure, et cetera, and then have it match that exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Like that would take a lot of work if your secure coding guideline is more than one page, which most of them are. But you could take the top 3 or top 5 things and make like SAST rules or, Open Policy Agent rules, et cetera. And I know that sounds weird, but there's usually certain things. I call it the nightmare list, but I'll start at a company and there's a couple of things I'll find very quickly where I'm like, I can't sleep. It's so bad. Right. And so those are the things you want to make that list for. So that's what my course is going to be about, like kind of try to identify those things. And then I'll be like, take Peter's course to figure out how to write really, really hard rules. Because I still, okay, so this is embarrassing, but I still kind of suck at writing some rules. And so I'm starting. I know.
You should see the basic ones that we write all live during the secure code review course, right? It's we struggle with it too, right? It's not,
Well, I'm starting a new monthly show starting next month called The Rules, where someone from some group's going to teach me how to write rules until I'm good enough that I can be the teacher. Because I was just like, it's getting literally embarrassing. Because customers are like, Tanya, like, come train us how to do this. And I'm like, please meet my friend Peter, or please meet my friend Brandon. And like, I send someone else like every time because I'm just like, I only know how to write baby rules that no one would ever want to actually have. So I need to get good at this if I'm going to work at a company where this is important.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the point that you're making, right? Like, there's a couple of things that like I'm pulling out of this, right? Like, so number one is like, how do you eat the elephant that is like AppSec vulnerabilities or, threat, for an organization? How do you actually start that? Because, I'm with you. I see this over my career, somebody installing a SaaS tool and then, they're throwing 50,000 findings at developers, and then developers are like, go away, we're just going to ignore this. And that's what they do, right? Like, we train them to ignore all of the noise that's coming out of security. And so half of my career, like embedded in organizations, has been, hey, I'm going to turn these off and I'm going to actually curate this list for you. But then on the flip side, it's like, what is the context and what is the priority of what you're sending them? Because some organizations aren't going to care about, certain items on the OWASP top 10. And it's appropriate because of the space that they're in, because what they're trying to accomplish with the company. It does not matter if you have something like, a social media company doesn't care about user enumeration, right? Like, they just don't, right? Like, that's the whole point of social media, is to share out your user and everyone follows you, right? And so like that's a very simplistic example, but they're not going to care about that. So that's not something we need to build a guardrail for in those cases. But hey, for a financial services firm or a bank, yeah, they're really concerned about those pieces of credential information. That's an appropriate guardrail to put into place. And so you've got to tune your level of response to the context and the priority of what that company is trying to accomplish. And I feel like, as application security people, that's half of what we're trying to do, is we need to listen better rather than telling people all the time what their risk is. You've got to listen to the players that are there, that are already entrenched and know what the business is, before you actually go in and spout, hey, there's all these things. And it's hard as someone that speaks about it all the time, because that's the first thing they're going to ask when you walk in is, what should we do? Like, how do we start an AppSec program? And you're like, well, actually, until I know what your business is, I'm not going to have a good answer for that, because I'm going to tell you things that are going to put you on a path, and then you're going to be mad that you spent all this money to protect something when you've got these other problems that I didn't know about because you didn't talk to me first, right? It's just it's a really, again, it's a hard path to kind of like navigate at times with the different organizations that you deal with.
I agree so much with everything you said.
So yeah, and so I was just trying to call out like kind of what I was getting out of the discussion that that was ongoing there. That being said, okay, so there's the course that's coming out from Peter. You're doing the rules stuff. Security guardrails.
Yeah, they're doing a bunch of, the marketing team's doing a lot of stuff. So I technically report to the marketing team, which, after reporting to product or engineering my entire life, is super weird. They're very nice to me, but they're always just like, why is she so weird? Because they'll be like, oh, I'm going to release this blog post. I'm like, because I'm always changing technical things, right? So they're doing some webinars. They're releasing a white paper and some blog posts on it. And like, they have a whole bunch of things going on, because basically, I guess, we're trying to help our customers move from reactive to proactive whenever possible, because basically so when someone buys your product, you want them to keep buying it. You don't want them to try it, have a bad experience, and be like, forget those guys, right? So if you ensure they have good security outcomes, they are more likely to renew, right? And so it's the same at Microsoft. It's like, we don't want you to just sign on the dotted line. We want you to use it. We want you to find bugs. We want you to get bugs fixed. We want you to be more secure, so that in the future, like, you're this great example, right? And so I remember like working at like with some people where they're just like, well, once they buy it, like, that's it. I'm like, oh, that's a really short-term plan. That's a plan to have good sales for only 1 year. And so if we can get many people, and like, it sounds weird, but the people that use the free SemGrep, they count too to us, even though they're not paying. They're still, in our eyes, they're still our customers. And so all of them, if we can support them in being more proactive and just block, like, there's this guy that I'm friends with called Jivan Singh, and he's the leader of the OWASP Vancouver chapter, and he's totally awesome. And he introduced me to this concept. He calls it burning down organizational risk. And he's like, I literally want to burn it down. And ever since he's told me that, like, or used that expression, I can't get it out of my head. Like, we want to take the scariest things first, get those done. Then the next scariest things, get those done, right? And sometimes there's things that you can scale really widely, and sometimes there's things you can't scale really widely, but they're still important to do, right? And so whenever I look at something, I'm like, first of all, can I scale this? Because there's usually just one of me. We're making new t-shirts. I've been asking forever, and I finally got approval. And they say, I am the AppSec team. I cannot wait. I'm trying to get them to make them in pink, not just gender neutral colors. I'm like, I really need one in pink. Anyway, says the woman wearing like bright blue. But anyway, like I feel like if we can make things more manageable, and whether it be for paying customers, free customers, the public, right? Because you can use the same concepts with any SaaS, right? Like, it doesn't matter which one you bought. So almost every SaaS, for people listening, you can write custom rules. Some of them are easier, some of them are harder. There are a few products out there where you can't, but most of them you can, right? And so if you can write a rule, then you can do this. If you have a secret scanner, you can make a pre-commit hook, right? If you're doing infrastructure as code and it's Terraform, because I think Open Policy Agent only works with Terraform. I don't think it works with like Ansible or like ARM templates and stuff, unfortunately, but take what you can, right? And like, try to just stamp out those really big, scary things first, and then work on bigger chunks. Like, a consulting trick that I have is like, whenever I start somewhere, I'll grab all their previous scan results, I throw it into Excel, and I figure out what their top 3 super scary things are. And then I do education on those things. I scan and like harass everyone to fix those things for like 3 months. And then after I show them, like, see this, it went like this. And we just took out like the super scary stuff. You're now like, you went from pathetic to somewhat reasonable, or somewhat reasonable to kind of decent, or whatever the level was. And then like, who wants to renew my contract? And it works really well because you've shown immediate return on investment, right? And like, that's what we want to do with our AppSec programs.
Yep.
We want to protect our org the best we can.
Yeah, I don't know, like, a lot of it comes back to the relationship, like getting access to what the results that you're talking about there. I always love to tell people, right? Like, ask the question of the developers, right? Like, what is it that keeps you up at night? Because that's where the dangerous stuff is. It's not necessarily in, SQL injection anymore, right? Like, it's in like, oh, we just redid our authentication and I'm very like leery about what's going on as we're sending all of this stuff around. Okay, let's take a look at that and make sure that it's secure before we move on to some of the other low-hanging fruit. Yes, the SAST may be reporting like thousands of things, but the priority there may or may not necessarily be important. So you've got to, it's all figuring that out, like exactly what you're saying. Like, what are the scary things? What Jivan is, mentioning as well, like reducing that organizational risk, and just like over time, it becomes a better thing. And as you do that, you will be rewarded for it. I always like to tell the teams, right, like that we've been working with year over year, like as I see those results coming out, right, like I'm like, hey, think about where we were at 4 years ago when we came in and we found 5 critical risk things that you had to take care of. And now you're only seeing lows. You're making my job as a code reviewer, as a tester, so difficult to actually put anything in this report. That's bad. Like, that's hard for me, for my ego, but it's also great for you from a security perspective, right? Like, I'm having to expand my mind to find anything to tell you, hey, maybe we could tune up X, Y, and Z. But that's okay, right? Like, that's what you want as an organization. Like, the value of us coming in as a third party is you've increased your security as opposed to, yeah, we identified 1,000 things.
Yes. So I'm actually I'm speaking at the Elephant in AppSec conference in November, and that's actually what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk
Awesome.
about like so many companies I work with. They're like, well, we need to find every single vuln. I'm like, no, you don't. You need to find the important things and actually get stuff fixed. And the idea of misplaced priorities sometimes. Yeah, I have it's supposed to be like an edgy conference. And so the name of my talk is Shift Left Doesn't Mean Anything Anymore. Because marketing teams have co-opted that term.
Yeah. Where is this conference? Elephant in
Are you
AppSec.
really
Where's
going to
that?
say that at the end of the episode? Because I've got like 30 minutes of ranting about shift left.
Yes.
More actually. I did a keynote on this like a few weeks ago. I can't believe at the end we're getting to that. But my
Can
goodness,
you send me a
like,
link? I want to watch that.
I don't have it recorded, unfortunately. But yeah, I forget who it was. It was in a Reversing Labs article, so I can't remember their name, but they use the term shift smart. And like, I know that's, I just can't even get into it, but shift smart seems much, but you're right. I think that's the root of everything that went wrong with shift left. And I think we've hinted at it a few times in the podcast and talked a little bit about it, but marketing teams but also product companies trying to do like a cash grab have absolutely wrecked that intention of what shift left was. Just can't believe we're getting into it now. So, but anyways, let me put this link to this to the Elephant in the AppSec conference up here.
Yeah.
I had a marketing consultant tell me, she's like, shift left means whatever you want. I'm like, you're literally the problem. And she's like, what makes you the expert? And I was like, Google pushing left. And then I was 7 of the 10 first page results. And I'm like, so I actually, unfortunately, helped popularize that term. And it meant starting security
not
earlier.
The problem.
Yeah. In SDLC, right? It meant stop just coming in with a pen test at the end. Because that's when I was a dev, that's what security was. They would come in at the very end with a pen test and tell me how much I sucked. And guess how valuable that was? Not very valuable, right? And I'm like, I want security there at the very first kickoff meeting. I want to be there the whole way through supporting you. And after you release, I still want to be there, right? And she's like, oh, okay, so I guess it does mean something. Like, I've seen marketing people do such crazy
I'll tell you what it
things,
doesn't mean. It doesn't mean just make a CI/CD plugin for your legacy SaaS tool and call it like dev friendly and shifting left. It's not what it means. But unfortunately, that's exactly what's been done. And they're like, oh, I have an idea. Security champions. Let's give these tools to security champions that are meant for security people. And that's shifting left too. So like they're going to just warn us about any significant risk based off of pilfering through and doing our job on top of their existing job. Boom, solved it. Yeah, I could continue down this line of reasoning for the next half hour to 45 minutes, easily just ranting nonstop. Believe me,
you should speak at this conference. You'd be so great, Ken.
Yeah, I like we just made a note. I noticed that the CFP is still open, so we will apply. And yes, because it looks like we'd love to. Yeah, love to.
It's spicy takes only.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've got a whole series on like we're not smarter than the gray hairs, right? I should say, right? Like the guys that were in the 60s and 70s and what they came up with as far as threats. Yeah, they were better at it than we are, right? But anyway, like now I'm getting into other topics. Tanya, it's been an hour. I want to be cognizant of your time, and we appreciate you so much coming back on, and your thoughts on Guardrails and the community and everything that you do. I was excited to see what's going on in your world. So maybe we won't wait quite as long before the reprisal, right? Like we'll try and make this a little less time between episodes to catch up with, recent doings in your world, if that's okay.
Well, next year my book's coming out, so maybe I could come on then and talk about it.
Yeah, we'd love to have you. So put us on the list, let us know, and then a few months before we'll get that scheduled and worked out, and then we can talk through the book and everything that's in that. Because I do have questions about the guideline, what you're putting into that as well. Will be helpful in my world specifically also. Anything else that you want to promote before we go ahead and wrap things up for today? I know we could continue to rant. I mean, that's always the case.
Absolutely. So if you want to see more of me, go to shehackspurple.ca. That is me. And I have all my socials and my newsletter and blog and everything there. And also, I hope to see some of you at Hacker Summer Camp this summer. I'm going to speak on the community stage at Black Hat. I'm going to speak at the AppSec Village at DEF CON, and I'm going to host the Cards Against AppSec. And so I hope to see lots of you there. If you see me, please say hi. I'm very extroverted. I'm 100% on the Myers-Briggs scale of extroversion. I love humans. And so if you see me, please don't be shy. Please come say hi. I love it. I love meeting new people. And so, yeah. Anyway,
that's great.
I'm excited to see people.
We are going to, yes, we are too. We're going to do an event for the podcast.
Oh, really?
I think it's going to be Friday. I think it sounds like we're going to do the big, what is it? The high roller.
High
right?
roller.
We're going to rent one of those out and have people come and drink during a big loop. We'll do a couple sessions of that. So if you're interested, Tanya, we'd love to have you.
Yeah.
There'll be other guests that are there. If it fits in your schedule, we know how Hacker Summer Camp turns out for everyone involved.
Right now it's open. I am planning lots of things. I'm planning book signings and all the things, and I'm totally looking for invites because I don't like Vegas. I just like Hacker Summer Camp. So I just want to do things the whole time.
Awesome. Yeah, we're with you. I've spent way too much time in Vegas to, enjoy what is the Strip, right? So,
it's so hot too.
Exactly. We'll send it over to you. We'll definitely once we get signups and make sure that because there's a lot of people that would love to say hi. I'm sure listeners as well. So
cool. Well, thank you.
Cool. Ken, anything else before we wrap up today's episode?
No. Just thank you, Tanya, and thank you for the viewers/listeners. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We will see you all online. And again, appreciate it, Tanya. See y'all next week. Thanks.